The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in relentless, gray sheets, washing the color from the world and turning the streets of the small coastal town of Candle Cove into swirling rivers of mud and dead leaves. Elara Vance watched it from the window of her rented room, the glass cool against her forehead. She was a journalist, or had been once. Now she was something else, a scavenger in the graveyard of the internet, digging for bones in the digital dirt. Her focus was a phenomenon she called the vanishings. Not the ordinary tragic missing persons cases that filled police blotters, but the other kind. The ones that caught the light just right, went viral, and then dissolved. They were stories that bloomed in the fertile, paranoid soil of online forums, fed by conjecture, amplified by algorithms, and then forgotten when the next outrage flickered across a screen. Elara was here for one case in particular. Lena Petrova, a young woman, 24, an amateur photographer. She had come to Candle Cove 6 months ago on a grant to document the stark beauty of the off-season coastline. She posted her work online, moody, beautiful shots of fog-wreathed lighthouses and storm-tossed waves. Her follower count was modest, her engagement genuine. Then she posted her last picture. It was unlike her others. Grainy, dark, taken at night. It showed the old Candle Cove Pier, its skeletal frame black against a bruised purple sky. But in the water, just beneath the surface, was a shape. It was long, sinuous, and pale. It could have been a trick of the light, a reflection of the moon on a rogue wave, a log. The internet, of course, decided it was a monster. The comments exploded. People zoomed in, enhanced, filtered. They saw scales, a massive eye, rows of teeth. They called it the Cove Creature. Lena's account became ground zero for a modern myth in the making. She seemed amused at first, replying to comments with winking emojis. Then her replies stopped. Her posts ceased. After a week of silence, her brother reported her missing. Her rented cottage was empty, her belongings neatly stored. Her camera and phone were gone. There was no sign of a struggle. Nothing. The official investigation found no evidence of foul play. The theory was that she'd gone out on the rocks for a night shot, a common practice for her, and been swept away by a treacherous wave. Her body was never recovered. The online community, however, had a different theory. The monster had gotten her. The story had everything: a mysterious creature, a beautiful victim, a picturesque, eerie location. It went supernova. For a month, Find Lena and Cove Creature trended globally. Then, as these things do, the fervor died. The world moved on, but Elara hadn't. She'd been compiling a book on the vanishings, and Lena's case was her white whale. It was the perfect example of how a real tragedy could be hollowed out and repackaged as entertainment, how the truth became a casualty in the war for clicks. She'd come to Candle Cove to write the final chapter, to lay out the cold, hard facts of a sad but explainable accident, and expose the mechanisms of viral hysteria. She just needed to dot the I's, cross the T's. The rain was making it difficult. It drummed a dull rhythm on the roof, a sound that seeped into your bones and made you feel perpetually damp. Elara turned from the window and looked at the case files spread across the small table. Lena's last photo was printed out, enlarged. Elara stared at the pale, blurred shape in the water. A log. It had to be a log. Her first stop that morning, once the rain had slackened to a stubborn drizzle, was the Candle Cove Public Library. It was a quaint sandstone building that smelled of old paper and lemon polish. The librarian, Mrs. Gable, was a woman in her 70s with kind eyes and a formidable knowledge of the town's history. She remembered Lena. "Oh yes, dear, the photographer," Mrs. Gable said, her voice a soft rustle. "She spent a lot of time in here, looking through our old archives, local newspapers, shipping manifests, that sort of thing. She was fascinated by the history of the cove itself." This was new. Lena's online persona was all about the visual, the immediate. She hadn't mentioned historical research. What was she looking for? Elara asked. Oh, the usual local stories, Mrs. Gable said with a wave of her hand. Shipwrecks, old legends, we have a few, you know, every coastal town does. She was particularly interested in the story of the Sweet Mercy. Elara's journalist instincts, long dormant, gave a faint stir. The Sweet Mercy? A merchant ship, the librarian explained, sunk just off the cove in a storm, 1923, worst tragedy in the town's history. Over 40 souls lost. They say the wreck is still out there, though it's picked clean by salvagers over the years. Lena was very taken with it, asked to see all the photographs we had of the aftermath. Elara thanked her, and spent the next 2 hours going through the same microfiche records Lena had viewed. She saw grainy black and white photos of debris washing ashore, of grim-faced townsfolk standing on the beach. It was sad, but it was a century-old tragedy. What had Lena found so compelling? The most famous photo was of a single life preserver, washed up on the stony beach, the ship's name, Sweet Mercy, just visible on its faded surface. It was a powerful image. Elara could see why a photographer would be drawn to it. She was about to leave when a small, tucked-away headline in a later edition caught her eye. Local man's delusion persists, insists something swam from wreck. The article was short, a filler piece from 1925. It detailed the claims of a surviving crewman, Elias Hargrove, who was committed to a sanatorium. He raved that the storm that sank the Sweet Mercy was not natural, that it was summoned by a song from the deep. He claimed that as the ship went down, he saw pale figures moving in the water, and that something long and white rose from the waves and followed the survivors towards shore. The town doctor diagnosed maritime hysteria. Elara made a copy of the article, a strange chill settling in her stomach. It was just a historical curiosity, a coincidence, a stressed sailor's hallucination, a log in a modern photo, nothing more. The internet had simply latched onto a local ghost story and given it new life. Her next visit was to the local pub, the Drowned Sailor. It was the kind of place where the air was thick with the smell of fried fish and stale beer, and the conversations paused when a stranger walked in. Elara took a seat at the bar and ordered a club soda. The bartender, a large man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too many tourists, gave her a once-over. "You're the writer," he said, not a question. News traveled fast. "I am, looking into the Lena Petrova disappearance." The man grunted, wiping a glass with a cloth. "Figured, we get 'em now and then, ghost hunters, conspiracy nuts. Didn't take you for the type." "I'm not. I'm writing about the people who are the type." This seemed to amuse him. He introduced himself as Ben, the owner. "So, what can I tell you? She came in here a few times, quiet, always had her camera, ordered a cider, sat in that corner booth, minded her own business." "Did she ever talk to anyone?" Elara asked. Ben thought for a moment, his eyes scanning the near-empty room. "Talked to old man Hemlock a few times." He nodded towards a figure sitting alone in a shadowy booth in the back, hunched over a bowl of stew. He was gaunt, with a face like a weathered map, and hands gnarled by a lifetime of hard work. "Hemlock's family's been here forever, knows more about this town and that cove than anyone, bit eccentric." Eccentric was exactly what Elara needed. She bought 2 whiskeys and carried them over to the old man's booth. "Mr. Hemlock? My name is Elara Vance. I was wondering if I could buy you a drink and ask you a few questions." The old man looked up. His eyes were a startlingly pale blue, and they held a sharp, unnerving intelligence. He looked at the whiskey, then at her. After a long moment, he gestured for her to sit. "You're here about the Petrova girl," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "I am. I heard she spoke with you." "But she did," asked about the cove, about the deep water past the pier, asked about the songs. Elara's pen hovered over her notebook. "Songs?" Hemlock took a slow sip of his whiskey. "The cove sings," he said matter-of-factly. "Not always. When the pressure drops, before a big storm, a low hum like a cello string played under the water. My grandfather heard it. His grandfather before him. They all knew." "Knew what?" "That it's a lure." He fixed those pale eyes on her. "The Sweet Mercy wasn't the first, just the biggest. Ships get drawn in. The rocks do the work, see? But sometimes things wash ashore, or someone swims out, drawn by the song, and doesn't swim back." He was talking about the legend. The very myth she was here to debunk. She felt a flicker of professional disappointment. She'd hoped for something more substantive. "And you told Lena this?" "I did, warned her to. Told her not to go listening for it, not to go out on the rocks when the air tasted of metal. But she was an artist. They're all the same. They have to see for themselves." He fell silent, staring into his whiskey. Elara tried another tack. "The official report suggests she fell from the rocks." Hemlock let out a short, bitter laugh. "Aye, that's what they always say. Clean, simple, doesn't scare the tourists, doesn't make folks look too hard at the water." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "But that's not what the song is for, girl. It doesn't want drowning victims. Drowning is quiet. It's "What does it want then?" Elara asked, playing along. "Attention," Hemlock said, his eyes gleaming. "It wants to be seen. It wants its picture taken. It's been down there in the deep, dark cold for a long, long time. It's lonely." The chill Elara had felt in the library returned. This was no longer the standard local ghost story. There was a specific, unsettling logic to Hemlock's version. It felt old, and worn smooth from being told and retold, like a worry stone. It felt, in some bizarre way, true. She left the drowned sailor feeling unsettled. The rain had started again, a fine cold mist that clung to her hair and coat. Her rational mind fought to reassert control. Hemlock was just an old man with a head full of stories. He'd spooked impressionable young artist, and she'd likely met with a simple, tragic accident. That was the truth. It had to be. Back in her room, she opened her laptop. The file for her book was there, the chapter on Lena outlined in clean, clinical bullet points. Victims' online activity fuels speculation. Local legend provides ready-made narrative. Lack of evidence leads to viral conspiracy theories. Tragic accident, obscured by digital folklore. It was neat. It was tidy. It was what her publisher expected. She looked at the copy of the 1925 newspaper article. Something long and white. She pulled up Lena's last photo on her screen. The pale, blurred shape in the water. She opened a photo editing program, something she hadn't done since the early days of her career. She began to adjust the image, not with the wild, conspiracy-driven enhancements of the online mob, but with a journalist's careful eye. She tweaked the contrast, the levels, the sharpness. The image clarified, the grain receding. The shape in the water remained frustratingly ambiguous, but then she looked past it at the water itself. Just beyond the pale shape, the water was different. It was darker, but not in a shadowy way. It was a profound, absolute blackness, a hole in the reality of the photograph, and within that darkness, as her eyes adjusted to the enhanced contrast, she saw something else. Not a shape, but the suggestion of one. A pattern within the black. It looked, for all the world, like the intricate spiraling pattern of a vast, unblinking eye. Elara slammed her laptop shut. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. This was it. This was the contagion of viral speculation she was supposed to be writing about. She was doing it to herself now, seeing patterns in the noise, finding monsters in the digital static. She was becoming one of them. She needed air. She needed to see the place for herself, without the filter of a camera or a computer screen. She needed to stand on the pier and see a log, or a wave, or nothing at all, and prove to herself that the world was still rational. She drove to the cove, the old, borrowed sedan struggling on the muddy track that led to the overlook. The rain had stopped, but the wind had picked up, whipping in from the sea, carrying the thick, salty smell of low tide. The pier stood before her, a black skeleton against a twilight sky. It was exactly as it was in the photograph, but different. In the picture, it had been an image, a composition. In person, it was a thing of rotting wood and rusted iron, creaking and groaning with the wind. It felt ancient and hostile. Elara walked onto it, her footsteps echoing hollowly. The wind tore at her clothes, pulling her hair across her face. The waves crashed against the pylons below, sending up plumes of cold, salty spray. She walked to the end, to the very spot where Lena must have stood. She looked down into the water. It was dark and churning, thick with seaweed. It was just water. Cold, deep, dangerous water, but just water. There were no pale shapes, no vast, spiraling eyes. There was only the wind, the waves, and the deepening dark. A wave of relief washed over her, so powerful it left her weak. She had done it. She had confronted the place and found it empty of monsters. It was just a place. A beautiful, dangerous, sad place where a young woman had died. She could go back now and finish her book. She could write the truth. She turned to leave, and that's when she heard it. At first, she thought it was the wind whistling through the broken planks of the pier, but it wasn't. It was a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the air, from the wood beneath her feet, from the water itself. It vibrated in her teeth, in the bones of her inner ear. It was a single, sustained, impossible note, deep and melodic. It was the most beautiful and the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. The song. It wasn't a story. It wasn't a delusion. It was real. Her scientific mind, her journalistic rigor, scrambled for an explanation. A hidden sewer pipe? A buoy horn? A trick of the acoustics against the cliff face? But the sound defied all of it. It was organic, alive. It felt ancient. And it was pulling her. It wasn't a physical force, but a compulsion, a deep, primal yearning. The sound filled a hole in her she never knew existed. All her life, her work, her drive to find the truth, it all felt like a prelude to this single perfect moment of hearing this sound. The world, the gray sky, the cold wind, the rational explanations, they all faded into insignificance. The only thing that was real was the song, and the need to find its source. To get closer, to see. She found herself moving towards the edge of the pier, her movements dreamlike, slow. The rotted railing was waist-high. She leaned over, peering into the dark, choppy water. The song was louder here, rising from the deep. It promised answers. It promised belonging. It promised an end to the lonely, frustrating search for truths that always seemed to dissolve in her hands. This was a truth you couldn't write about. This was a truth you had to join. A part of her, a small, screaming voice locked in a distant room in her mind, knew what was happening. It was the part that had written the bullet points for her book. It was the part that understood the mechanisms of viral stories, of how they tap into something deep and irrational. It was the part that knew this was how it happened. This was how they all happened. Not by monster, not by accident, but by this perfect targeted lure. This song that found the one person in the crowd who was listening for it, the searcher, the truth seeker, and offered them the ultimate, irresistible truth. The voice in her head was shouting now, telling her to run, to shut her ears, to remember Lena, to remember Elias Hargrove from night. But the song was so much louder. It was inside her. It was her. She leaned further out, straining to see into the depths. The black water swirled. And then something did rise. It wasn't a log. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was long and pale and smooth, a color that had never been meant to see the sun. It didn't breach the surface. It just hung there, suspended just beneath it, a vast, silent presence answering the call of its own song. And within its surface, patterns began to form and dissolve, fractals of light and shadow that resolved for a breathtaking second into the shape of a vast spiraling eye that looked not at her but into her. And Elara understood. This was the unmasking. This was the truth behind the viral disappearance. It was not a mystery to be solved. It was a transaction. The creature offered a truth so absolute it obliterated the need for questions. And in return, it asked for everything. It asked for you. The last thing Elara Vance ever did was not a scream. It was not a struggle. It was a sigh of perfect, profound relief. She let the song pull her forward, a final, graceful dive into the waiting dark below. The water was colder than she ever could have imagined. Her rented car was found the next day, parked haphazardly near the pier. Her laptop, her notes, her recorder were all in her room. The chapter on Lena Petrova remained unfinished, a collection of sterile bullet points that now seemed laughably naive. The local police filed another report. Another tragic accident. Another writer who got too close to the edge. The story made a small ripple online. Journalist vanishes while researching viral mystery. For a week there was speculation. Had she uncovered something? Had she been silenced? Was the monster real? Then the world moved on. In a quiet corner of the internet, a new post appears on an obscure forum. It's a picture, uploaded by a user with a newly created account. The picture is dark, grainy, taken at night. It shows the Candle Cove Pier, but in the water, just beneath the surface, are two long, pale, sinuous shapes. The comments when they come are excited, fearful, hungry. They begin to zoom in, to enhance, to filter. They see scales. They see eyes. They see a story. And the song deep below, in the perpetual dark, waits for the next one who is truly listening.